Hey everybody. Is Adam Silver here? I thought he was going to be here for a second. No? All right. You got this queued up? Want us to take us away? Sure, so the reason I bring up Adam Silver to start is because he once said nothing can be number one unless it's number one in China. So with that in mind, we're going to take you through why the Houston Rockets should implement an integrated media rollout strategy in China today. Before we get into that, I'd like to introduce ourselves. My name is John Greeley. This is Pierce Cohen and Ethan Nussbaum. We're students at the McCombs School of Business. We're going to be taking you through the current NBA landscape right now. So the Houston Rockets boast it's at third right now, as Pierce is sad to say, fourth best record in the NBA at the moment. An exciting team. They've been in China for a long time. 2002, they drafted Yao Ming, #1 overall. That built some inroads that are paying off today. The NBA is the third largest sports league in the country, as it stands in revenue with about $5 billion annually, and it's actually currently investing heavily in digital media, with the NBA League Pass 27 million people, or 27 million games watched last year, which is a record, and it's growing every year. And finally, in China right now, basketball is already the biggest sport. 765 million people watched a game last year. 765 million people. And that's incredible to begin with, and it's only getting bigger. And so the NBA has actually recently, this year, released a version of the League Pass app with Tencent, the Chinese telecom provider. They're planning heavily to implement NBA streaming in China moving forward. So let's move it to the next one, which presents us with the big opportunity. Yeah, there we go. $500 million. That's what's on the table right now in China. The pie is growing at an astronomical rate, and the Rockets, by implementing a plan today, in 20 years, could stand to make $500 million in additional income. So how are we going to do it? First, I guess we're going to start with reach. Well, we're going to start with why the Rockets to begin with. So why the Rockets? Well, to begin with, they have a head start. As I mentioned, 2002 is when they drafted Yao Ming, #1 overall. Since then, they've seen a huge growth in Chinese fans. In social power, the NBA is already 100 million strong in China and growing. And the Rockets are already China's team. They drew up to 30 million people for a regular season game watching the Rockets. If the entire state of Texas watched a Houston Rockets game, it would be fewer than the number of people who watched in China for that one, 27 million to 30 million. It's incredible where they're at already. But to implement the strategy, we have to start with reach. So reaching out to the largest number of people possible is the first stage in building the Rockets as China's team, the #1 overall team in the world. To do that, we're going to start with social media initiatives on WeChat, on Weibo, on Chinese brands that consumers understand and trust out there. And building it from a Chinese perspective will build that audience trust and that reach. Then we're going to convert that to loyalty. We're going to tailor content to the Chinese market from that Chinese voice, and we'll have a membership model. And we're going to expand based on European soccer membership models that will eventually be monetized, but first we'll provide that loyalty, that extra step, that personalized touch that they're going to be looking for. And then in the monetization standpoint, it'll be largely through merchandising, as well as some subscription-based fees and digital-only perks. But we're going to take it to Ethan here, who's going to tell us about the loyalty and reach.
Thanks, John. So the first part of our plan involves building up the exposure of the Rockets to the current Chinese audience. And we do this through a three-pronged social media initiative. The first is to launch a Chinese Weibo account. So Weibo is a microblogging site similar to Twitter here in the US. It has an expensive amount of reach in China currently, and there's fairly low advertising costs, which allow us to reach a brand new audience. As part of this, we also want to hire a dedicated Chinese social media director who will oversee all of our social media campaigns. The second part of this involves harnessing WeChat. WeChat is one of the largest mobile apps currently in China, with over 570 million daily active users. By utilizing this outreach, we'll be able to further increase exposure to current players and the Rockets organization as a whole. And finally, we want to create an online media platform dedicated to our Chinese fans. We'll have published curated content for the Chinese market and exclusive player interviews that will further expose our current Rockets players to this new market. The second part of our reach initiative involves, streaming initiatives. So mini movies are a unique streaming content in the Chinese market. These are pretty much 10 to 15 minute long extended advertisements for a specific product featuring current Chinese actors that are very large in the market. These things have the potential to be huge. The most recent Pepsi mini movie campaign topped out at over 500 million viewers. the exposure here far exceeds anything that our social media campaign might reach. And who wouldn't love to see Hardin acting in one of these things? And finally, we look at the Youku video platform. This is the equivalent of YouTube in China. What's unique about this is it offers us the ability to put little game highlights at the beginning of some of these movies and really draw in some of these new clients. It really shows them why they should be excited about the Rockets. All right, so once we have people on the hook, we really need to convince them that they should stick with the Rockets in the long haul. This brand loyalty is really the foundation of how we eventually monetize. And so one of the things we wanted to really see was kind of securing sponsorship with Chinese companies. By having someone like Alibaba on the Rockets jerseys next year or advertising in the arena, the Chinese market will see that the Rockets are really committed to their economy as well. We also want to offer exclusive Chinese broadcasts of these games live to the market. And finally, we want to offer special VR streaming experiences and a Rockets-themed VR mobile gaming app to the Chinese audience. And this ties really well into our Rockets membership package. So for $30, the Chinese market is able to buy into a Rockets membership. This, as John said, is modeled after the European Soccer League memberships that have proven very successful in the past. This will get them a $20 discount on a single team league pass, allowing them to view all of the Rockets games for that season, and comes with a Rockets-themed cardboard VR headset, which allows them to actually experience some of that specific VR content that we're releasing to them. It also gets them the first piece of their Rockets apparel, which eventually helps them build up some of that Rockets memorabilia, which is really how we start to monetize some of this. Now, we realize that these are expensive initiatives up front, and this is going to be a large capital investment, but we truly believe that the downhill gains far outweigh that upfront cost. And now I'll pass it off to Pierce, who will talk a little bit about risk mitigation and monetization.
So whenever you want to roll out an international plan, such as the one we're pitching, you kind of have to look at the risks and make sure there's nothing that could basically undermine everything that you're building out. So what you're seeing here is a few of the risks and considerations that we took into and some of the mitigations that we think could help us roll out this plan. And I won't get into all of them for the sake of time, but the one I really wanted to touch on was, what if another team beats us to the punch? What if another team goes into China and takes the label of China's team? And we're going to fight that on basically a two-front approach. And the first is basically built into the inherent Rockets brand. They're already built as China's team over the past decade and a half, ever since Yao Ming was drafted. There's been a really big exposure to the Rockets brand in China. So we're going to leverage that and use that moving forward. And second, which we'll see in a little bit when we talk about the numbers, we're going to be the first mover. We're going to go out there fast. We're going to have a significant upfront investment into China for marketing. And that's going to help us see the gains later, like Ethan mentioned, as we capitalize on some of the long-term growth. So the strategy that John and Ethan had pitched to y'all was basically loyalty and reach, but the end goal is monetization. If we can get these fans, that's great, but at the end of the day, we really want to make sure we capitalize and make some money off the new fan base. And we're going to do this on a three-tiered approach. The first, we are going to leverage the new data we get from the new fan base, package that to our advertisers, so that'll be the first thing that we do. The second, this is increased exposure. In China, we'll be able to leverage that through new selling mediums such as WeChat, which is very popular in China, League Pass purchases, and possibly in TV purchases through our Rockets TV package. And finally, and the biggest thing that we're looking at is the merchandising sales growth that we're going to be seeing over the next 20 years. The first thing that most fans do when they become a fan, when they become a fan, is they want to buy some sort of merchandise. Show off that they're a Rockets fan. I know I still have my Sam Cassell jersey from 1995, way back in the day. Fortunately, it doesn't really fit as well as it used to. But that's the kind of loyalty that we're looking to reap and really capitalize on moving forward. So John hit you with the big number at the beginning, and rest assured we have done some analysis to justify this. The biggest thing that we see as a benefit from this plan is the future compound growth from heavy investment up front. So we want to be clear, this will not be a immediate money-making venture. You can see here it's about an 8 to 9 year payback period. We want to be the loss leader to make sure we can really reap the upfront gains of increased fan base. And you can see on the graph on the right, there's basically 3 different venues that the revenue will be coming from. The first is the organic growth that will be coming from the NBA in China, just as it grows naturally. The second is from the plan itself. That's about a $280 million game. And the third, and which is what we're pitching now, is the first mover advantage. It's about $143 million of net present value that you can capture now as opposed to moving in about 5 years. So moving forward, John's going to take us home.
Yep. So we got the numbers here. We'll justify them. We got it all in the appendix. But the point isn't so much the assumptions we've made, and we can show you those in a second. The point is that moving now, the principle's not going to change. Moving now is a crucial step to the strategy for the Houston Rockets because other teams aren't in the position to capitalize like they are right now. The Houston Rockets have a golden opportunity to expand in a game that's already popular in China. It's getting more popular, and the pie is only growing. Once the Chinese market matures a little bit, once that customer lifetime value goes up across the board, then these teams, every NBA team, is going to be seeing some payoffs. We believe that the Rockets are uniquely positioned to be the #1 team in China and the #1 team in the world. Thank you, and we'll take your questions.
I suppose I can kick us off again. Thank you, guys. So I'm hoping you can help me get as excited about the fan base and the opportunity that you're talking about here, because I looked in some of the supporting details, and it's looking at something like 35% year-over-year growth for the fan base. And given the Rockets have been China's baby since 2004, what have you, what makes you believe, or help me come along for the journey of why we're now going to be able to achieve 35% year-over-year growth in that fan base?
Yeah, so the first thing we're going to do, like you said, there's already been a lot of Chinese fans for the Rockets over the past decade or so. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to spend a pretty significant amount of capital, like we mentioned, really get the marketing team out there and really build some Chinese-specific media packages that we can roll out. And that'll be the first way we capture them. And that's really the main front that we'd be going on. The second, with all the money that's going into the NBA, we figured that there's more and more outreach that we can reach or get into for the Chinese community. So by building the Rockets membership club, like Ethan mentioned, we're trying to build as many different ways that we can reach these consumers as we can. And like you mentioned, try to build on that aggressive growth target.
And also, in 1997, Manchester United was already the biggest team in America. They now have a lot more fans than they did in 1997. Still the biggest team in America.
What did their growth look like?
Manchester United's growth was pretty exponential right around 2005 in the US. That's when they started doing a lot of the American tours. There wasn't really much of a first mover advantage there. Arsenal, Liverpool, and to a degree Manchester City and Chelsea made some gains as well. That's why we believe it's important to start early.
Can you clarify, are you selling live games direct to fans in China? From the Rockets to Chinese fans? Is that what you're trying to do?
You mean in China or on TV?
China. Streaming.
Oh, the streaming. No, so that's all through NBA League Pass.
Okay, so none of this plan includes live rights.
No, because those are legal nightmare. The
Okay.
NBA League Pass wouldn't allow the Rockets to sell it individually. So the membership plan will subsidize that.
Okay, so let's dig into that then. So give us a little bit more detail on how your plan, which includes a membership program, which includes social media outreach, how is that plan going to lead to $500 million? So can you give us a little bit more specifics there?
Yeah, so like we mentioned, the social media plan is pretty key to our community outreach and fostering loyalty. Basically, the $500 million number boils down to 2 things. It's how many fans are in China and how much revenue are you generating per fan. So we didn't have any good numbers as far as how many fans we have in China. We took the base estimate of 1 million, but playing around with those numbers and varying that starting point, it really doesn't change the underlying message that we are sending. It might change your MPV, but at the end of the day, it's still telling you that it's a massive potential for profit. And the second was the revenue per fan. So right now, the latest estimate from Forbes was the Rockets generate about $31 per fan. I think that was in 2015. So we took a pretty conservative approach to how much we're extracting currently from China. There's not really any good numbers out there. So we took 2% of that number, 62 cents per fan. And we decided to grow that pretty aggressively as we're implementing these strategies, getting more Rockets fans in there, getting them more loyal, and then tapering that off to a more conservative growth rate. That ends up going to about $10 per fan in 20 years, which we think is fairly reasonable. So that $500 million, like you mentioned, that's a very big number. But at the end of the day, we think the growth rates for what we're rolling out, they seem reasonable. So, and that just underscores how big of an opportunity that China is for the rockets at the end of the day. That help answer your
Thank you.
question? Oh. Yeah, there's the actual assumptions that we made.
I think that's all we got.
All right.
All right, great. Thanks for your time.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.